Good morning and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Greenwich Board of Selectmen. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning and welcome. This is a public meeting. It is not a public hearing. The chair reserves the right to call upon any interested attendee to pose a question or make brief comment on any matter that's before the board today. There are copies of the meeting's agenda on the table as you enter the meeting room, as well as two sets of the materials that are before the board for public discussion and consideration. Item 2 on our agenda is approval of minutes from the September 24th meeting. Are there any corrections or changes to those minutes? If there is not, is there a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, without objection. Okay, looking at updates in September 24th, there's been quite a few things that have happened and also things that will be happening, which we'll report on this morning. In terms of past events or actions, we were notified that a Freedom of Information Commission complaint was dismissed by them, which was filed earlier in the year by Don Fortunato, and it was in relation to matters related to the Greenwich Housing Authority and their requests to seek municipal improvement as well as state financing for the renovation of Armstrong Court. So that has been adjudicated. October is Wellness Month, and there were free mental health checkups, wellness info, and activities presented here on October 8th for residents and employees. On the 24th of September, I was pleased to attend the YWCA Spirit of Greenwich Awards. This recognized several notable women in our community who have contributed greatly to its quality of life. Cindy Anderson, Elaine Buss, Patricia Geismar, Nisha Hurst, Joy Lautenbach, Joan Lowe, Leah Marmon, Giovanna Miller, and Emily Sternberg. On September 26th, the Hamilton Avenue School celebrated 100 years of excellence. It was a wonderful program put on by the PTA, and also Ms. Crumbine, who's here, our Goodwill Ambassador, contributed greatly in supporting their efforts over the course of several years. So thank you. And of course, on September 27th was the grand and glorious 375th anniversary parade, and we're grateful for Davida Strackbine's leadership with her committee in putting on that wonderful festivity, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about it in the program this morning. On October 5th, I was thankful to have the opportunity by the Greenwich Chamber of Commerce to present the State of the Town address. It was well attended. Many good questions came from the audience on that afternoon, and was happy to have the opportunity. Later that day, we were over. John joined me at the Koskov School for the grand opening of their innovation space. This was an initiative that was supported by parents, as well as the Greenwich Alliance for Education, the school PTA, and really brings the whole science, technology, engineering, and math component into what is now known as the Media Center, although they're changing the names of media centers, I gather, to be called innovation spaces. But it was really wonderful to see the kids enjoy the new devices, technology, and all the great stuff that kids love, Legos and so forth. On October 7th, we were all in attendance for the grand opening of the Greenwich High School Performing Arts Center. It was tremendously overwhelming, the just sheer magnitude of the sound and the acoustics and so forth. And again, I think everyone is pleased with this wonderful resource that's available to not only our students, but the town. We were notified several, I think, months ago, but we received it yesterday, that Greenwich was recognized as a clean energy community. This is something that we worked toward over the course of several years. Denise Savageau, our conservation director, accepted the award on behalf of the town. The Clean Energy program promotes clean energy technologies and energy conservation for town facilities and also for town residents and businesses. We were recognized at the bronze level, and we are nearing becoming a silver level community. So there's a nice bamboo plaque that recognizes this achievement. It is important to recognize the Conservation Commission's efforts in this area with regard to the town's lead energy education and outreach effort. There was a subcommittee chaired by Gail Hagegard until her most recent move out of Greenwich, and William Rutherford and Gary Silverberg also served on this committee. Under the subcommittee, the town was able to participate in the Solarize Connecticut program, which doubled the residential installation of solar in 6 months over the previous 10 years, and also promoted the CPACE program aimed at commercial establishments. Internally, the town coordinated our departments to establish baseline energy consumption for town buildings with the goal of reducing energy consumption through efficiencies. Several key initiatives that the town has been engaged in include working towards an energy-efficient fleet and incorporating green energy into building design, such as the geothermal at Hamilton Avenue School and the solar panels at the Glenville School. I would point out that the fleet department has just taken over ownership of, I believe, 4 propane-powered vehicles, and there is now a propane filling station at the North Street fueling station, which is a company next to the animal control facility as in Parks and Trees building. Under Ben Brannon's leadership, the Greenwich Public Schools implemented an energy conservation program for all school buildings with much success. In addition to this recognition, the town has been awarded 2 $4,500 rewards for participation in the Solarize and CPACE programs. The rewards will be used for energy conservation or green energy projects in town. And I want to acknowledge Denise Savageau's work, Ben Brannon, and Melissa Jones, who's going to be working to program those dollars. Other past meetings, we had a meeting last week with CT Rides, which is a initiative under the state of Connecticut that promotes ride sharing. It's free to towns in terms of as a resource. They're looking at new, more greener ways to get people to and from places of employment. They offer employees commuter tax benefits. They have online ride-sharing programs. They have state-subsidized vans, which include maintenance, which includes gas maintenance for 6 or more commuters if you undertake this ride-sharing. Marcia Ahrens is their outreach coordinator, and we enjoyed signing on to this initiative. And again, it really will become a resource for our employees. It's interesting to note, just within our small office, we have 3 individuals who live out of town, and all of them get here by a Metro North Railroad, and that's Mike Rosen, Ben Brannon, and Melissa Jones. So I think that's a testament what can happen more globally. We were talking with the schools, and clearly there's an opportunity, if there were a van service reinstituted, that they could avail themselves to it as well and cut down the traffic on 95. On September 24th, I had a visit with Aaron Karloff, who's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He happens to live in Brooklyn Heights, but works for the Wall Street Journal, previously with Bloomberg, and he was writing really about the creditworthiness and the attractiveness of state general obligation bonds and how our population views them in light of some of the fiscal challenges the state is facing. We spent over 3 hours with him. I had Senator France with me for about an hour of that, talking to him about not only the economics within the state, but looking at our diverse population. I took him to Byram, Chickahominy, we went into Bruce Park, we went to the high school, I showed him the Performing Arts Center, and gave him kind of a broad context of the community and recognizing that, yes, there's affluence, but there's also significant diversity economically and culturally and ethnically. So I believe this story ran. I was not quoted in it, believe it or not, that's fine, but Senator France was. And it was a great opportunity to really promote the town and talk about what the town truly is. We had the Board of Parks, which is an advisory board to the Office of the First Selectman, take up a matter that relates to extending the dogs off-leash policy at the beach. Now, this is a policy that actually is set by the Board of Health, but since it involves the use of Greenwich Point, we had asked the advisory board to take up consideration of the proposal that was submitted by petition to us. And they did, and they decided by a vote of, I believe, 2-7 to not extend those, the time frame that is currently in place. They did, however, vote affirmatively to establish a subcommittee to look at other options for individuals who have dogs to recreate outside perhaps the beach area, but somewhere else in town. So I do want to thank them. They spent a lot of time working on this review, and it's appreciated. Let's see, Tuesday, we had an interesting opportunity to meet with some of our representatives from our sister city of Rose, Italy. We had the mayor of Rose, Dr. Mario Bria, the deputy mayor, Francesco Imbrugna, and the Cosenza mayor, Mario Occhiotto? Acuti. On hand, of course, was our town's goodwill ambassador, B. Crumbine, who is fluent in Italian and was able to allow for very proper discourse and communication between the parties. But ultimately, they're here to celebrate Columbus Day, to showcase the Rose Community Band, marching band, and participate in the New York Columbus Day Parade. We did exchange some novelties. They brought some figs that were handed to us, and the overall purpose, though, is to really cultivate this very deep relationship that this community has with residents here in the town of Greenwich. And so we hosted a small reception, and we look forward to hopefully garnering some folks to travel next year to finally see the ancestral roots of so many that have emigrated. Future events, October 16th, we'll be swearing in Special Police Officer Pat Orofino, who just retired from the Greenwich Police Department as a very outstanding officer. He received 3 of the John Clark Awards in his tenure, which is the most, I think, any one individual had attained, and he was just granted the new title as retired, I believe it's, I don't have it in front of me, first class detective. And so we herald Pat coming back to be a special. On October 19th at 3 p.m., the Greenwich Common will be heralding in the new renovations with a ribbon cutting at 3 p.m. This has been a long time coming. It was one of the recommendations out of the Plan of Conservation's Downtown Planning Committee, and it involved installing new handicap accessible sidewalks throughout the park from Town Hall all the way to Greenwich Avenue, increased decorative lighting along with new turf, as well as benches and tables for people to leisurely read, dine, play checkers, or what have you. And I would encourage you, if you haven't been out there, to please go check it out. It's really eye-catching and pleasant, and it really brings an urban center of greenery to the downtown and enhances our downtown. On the 20th, there's the Connecticut Conference of Municipality Convention in Hartford. There'll be several of our staff attending, as we are a membership community. It is an opportunity to meet various trade organizations that provide services to municipalities, as well as meet with other municipal officials from throughout the state. On the 21st, we will be participating in the State of Connecticut's and Governor's Emergency Planning and Preparedness Drill. This year, the drill is focused on a simulation of an event concerning a school. Notably, it's weather-related, so there'll be, opportunity for much of the public school administration principals to participate and acquire a sense of what they would have to do should, as an example, a tornado hit one of our facilities, or a hurricane, or any type of sudden event where they would have to be prepared to not only respond but recover from. So that's on the 21st, and that will take place over at the Emergency Operations Center at the Greenwich Police Department. Finally, administratively, we have, as you know, representatives from the Board of Selectmen sit on various committees. Selectman Marzullo has been very ably and diligently sitting on the New Lebanon School Building Committee as our ex officio member. Over the course of the last week, there has been some conversations that have since now been brought forth in the more public domain through the media about what the building committee is looking to prepare for development of this new school with a very acclaimed architect. I think the concern primarily that we're hearing and that we're trying to make sure is properly adjudicated is that there were very specific approvals granted by this board for the development of that site under what is referred to as municipal improvement. The municipal improvement specified, revised what was referred to as Scheme D, and I gather there's been conversations about perhaps altering that a bit. Certainly, we're for full vetting and opportunities and options, but we do run the risk of having a potential change over what was ultimately approved, and thereby creating a question of governance in terms of following a prescribed process. I did communicate very clearly to the chairman of the building committee and to the chairman of the Board of Education the concern that Mr. Marzullo presented to me, and suggested that perhaps we sit down to review that so that there is not this potential future issue of governance. Mr. Walko seemed amenable to it. Unfortunately, Ms. O'Neill she is amenable. She had to travel out of town the next couple of days due to a family illness. But I think this board, each of us individually, have the same authority, and we unanimously were clear as to what we were intending. And so my message, and I look for the support of both Mr. Marzullo and Mr. Toner, is that if there is going to be a change, that the Board of Education, as the client of the building committee, take this up and follow this very closely, so that if they're going to do that, they affirm it, because they did vote in accordance with what this board ultimately approved, which was revised Scheme D. So did you want to comment?
Yeah, just, and I'm going to echo the first selectman. And it is important to point out that, as Peter just did, and I did so yesterday at the building committee meeting, that this board did vote unanimously in terms of MI referral, what we call modified Scheme D. And as Peter, the first selectman, said, any deviation to Site D would constitute, in my opinion, a revote by the Board of Education, and then a revote by us, which in fact will be our fourth vote on MI. And I will say this too, without prejudging the two plans being brought before this board on November 11th, that in fact, if an MI is required on a deviation that could result in a different type of MI, that could result in some time delay. So I would like to say that could. And I will also say any plan involving, and we will have this discussion, involving keeping children in New Leb while major construction is being conducted, for me, begs the question of real concerns and why this board voted the way it did in the first place. Now, safety concerns that will warrant, in my opinion, a professional input to convince me or us that a $30 million construction project in no uncertain terms will cause any type of harm, obviously, to kids or parents. I bring that up because that was one of the reasons in terms of our conditions of voting down how we did. So those are the two issues. So we'll see November 11th.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very able participation in that. And again, I think it's been reaffirmed, but I think perhaps with your support that we direct our communication to the full Board of Education. It's already been communicated to Ms. O'Neill, Chairman O'Neill, but I've already received several telephone calls from other board members inquiring as has view. And perhaps, Mr. Branyan, if you can just compose a letter for us reaffirming the direction and process. The town attorney was copied on my correspondence with Mr. Walco and Ms. O'Neill, but again, we just want to have clarity of purpose and not have a potential issue of governance over following the proper authorities. I think it's just that simple. Okay, that concludes updates. Old business, there's no old business. New business. Under new business, our first item today is really a very pleasant one. We are a community of volunteers. We have been fortunate in that regard that our whole system of governance relies upon volunteers, just as was pointed out with the building committee of the folks who are serving so capably on that.
Patricia, by the way, is here.
And Patricia, of course, Patricia Kantorski, a very esteemed architect and designer of schools, and so emblematic of our volunteerism. Oh, sure.
Can I make one comment about the building committee and their mission with respect to the site?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, sure. If you want.
I'd just like to say we take that understanding of the site very seriously, and it was exactly what we gave to Isu Kim, the architect that we chose, through a very long vetting process. And we took it very seriously, and that's the mission we gave him, without a question. It was from them that said, we will do exactly, but we feel there may be another way of doing it. We'd like the opportunity to show it to you. And so we felt as a committee that having hired the professional, we should listen to at least see why they were thinking, because of parking and turnaround for the buses and front entrance. And there was a lot of reasons that they felt that we should at least give them the opportunity. And it is pretty typical in the business, very typical actually, when you go from feasibilities to schematic design. And I believe, from my point of view, not having seen the plan yet, but it is just a nuance. It is just a slight variation. And when we see that, we certainly would favor, if it made a lot more sense, the plan that was strict. But if being so strict, it was a disadvantage, then we felt it was our responsibility to bring it to the committee, everyone's attention, if there was a better scheme but wasn't so far, because we're not considering the field, we're not considering the ravine. That's not its part. But we also understood that the exact footprint that was laid out by Giusofi and accepted by the Selectmen did have a third of the building cascading into the wooded area on the slope. So they're taking advantage of the topography to relate the gym to the field. So I don't believe, from what I've heard from Taisha Kim, that it's significantly different. So it isn't that they're going so far out of the mission, but that's yet to be seen. When they present it, if it is so different and it's not an advantage, we certainly wouldn't consider that.
Thank you very much for that very clear and purposeful context of report. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, highlighting our volunteers, the 375th Anniversary Committee was very ably led by Davida Strackbine, and I want to personally acknowledge my admiration And great thanks to you, Davida, on behalf of the citizens of the town, joined by my colleagues today, for really a splendid
Amazing.
program that covered all areas of town. You know, we talk about Greenwich being a community of neighborhoods, and you really took the charge with great fervor in celebrating those neighborhoods and looking at them individually with the various tours and bringing forth docents who had integral knowledge. And for that, we're eternally grateful, and I think it's not just this generation, but future generations can look back on it and say with great pride that they have an appreciation and understanding of what Greenwich is. And so today, on behalf of the town and the Board of Selectmen, we want to present you with a certificate of appreciation that was designed by Joe Kantorski, who was the master graphic artist for the 375th Anniversary Committee. And so we're going to come down and we're going to present this very lovely plaque. We'll read it from here. It says, Certificate of Appreciation presented this 15th day of October 2015 to Davida Strackbine with special thanks for your tireless efforts as chairman of the 375th Anniversary Celebration, including the Neighborhood Tours Committee. Your leadership, inspiration, and steadfast commitment to bringing the history of Greenwich to life has greatly benefited the town. Davida, we salute you.
Yeah, we do.
And we're going to bring those down.
May we have a photo op?
Sure, we're going to run
Tons.
Thank you so much.
She's a star.
Sure, and I just want to say that, I lost my bearings. This was this week. You assembled quite a impressive team, and we also want to acknowledge and express our appreciation to all of them. I see Mary Ellen Levine, who was part of our parade committee and really marshaled all those
Speaking of which,
people, and also led us off as a direct descendant of Elizabeth Feek. So thank you, and of course to Joe for your work, the Historical Society, and B for initially sitting down with me and figuring who can best undertake this leadership, and we came to you, Davida. So again, thank you so much for what you did for the town of Greenwich. Please.
And may I add, the parade, I don't think I've ever been to such a long, that was a long, I mean, how many, it's still going on. I mean, how many people participated in the parade? Like how, no, I mean, in terms of groups, I'm just curious. Wow, amazing, amazing, amazing. Well done. Well done.
So welcome.
Well, thank you. I started to try to list individuals. I've talked it over with my husband, who is my guiding light, and he said, "Well, we have to take out pages of the newspaper, and just list them, because it's such an extraordinary cross section of our town." I'd like to say, when Ron and I talked about taking on this responsibility, we talked about, what had enriched our life. And that's this community. It has, since we arrived in the early 1970s, given us so much pleasure in every aspect. It's great leadership in the town, but you then look back, and this town just gives so much back. They get so much but they give all the time. And as you said, it's a government truly by the people, for the people, and about the people. And so in reaching out to try to understand how you could thank a town, the first step was to create a mission statement that would guide us through this year. And the mission statement was to create a year-long town-wide celebration of programs and events honoring the town's rich cultural, you've heard it many times, cultural heritage by sharing, preserving, and fostering memories of the past and present while creating a legacy for tomorrow. History and legacies are like batons in a relay race. It's passed from person to person, and they continue to enrich our lives, our understanding, our society. That is, unless the baton is dropped. Then someone has to pick it up and get back in the race. But if no one picks it up for so long that no one knows where it is or remembers what it was or how to pick it up, they begin to wonder why it matters at all. Well, we picked up the baton, the town of Greenwich, and important historical events or eras that seemed remote appeared closer. And we think we followed the arc of American history through women's and men's narratives forward to today. We found we have at least 4 descendants of Elizabeth Feek, one of the founders of Greenwich in 1640, and they keep appearing. In the rededication of Putnam Hill Park, we took an archival photograph of the dedication in 1932 of that long-lost park. Most people drive by it and don't even know what it is. But one woman was pictured in the photograph, and she received the Save the Date postcard. And it turned out that she was in it. And she recognized herself, and her daughter contacted us, and she was there for the rededication of Putnam Hill Park in Knapp Tavern on the day of the rededication 83 years ago. So, and almost a profound lesson of history is that things were not always the way they are today. Today we take for granted the present, assuming it was always that way. If students could come to understand that things are not always like they are now, they can imagine how things should be, and they would be empowered to make them that way. It takes people like a community of volunteers to remind people about the profound lessons of history, and that continuity is critical, and that tomorrow will not look like today, and that it is up to us collectively to help shape tomorrow, so that when 51 local, or now it's 71 local nonprofit organizations, and I just received notice that over 100 volunteer policemen from the town of Greenwich gave their time, come together as community volunteers to march to the beat of Scottish bagpipes and British fifers and Irish fifers and high school bands and an American drum and bugle corps. They entered Havemeyer Field for the unfurling of the American flag. As the band played the national anthem, they were not only honoring our men and women in uniform, but honoring our country, our state, and the 375-year legacy this great town of Greenwich we all know and love today has created. It has been, I thank you, Peter, for the honor, wonderful to shape the 375-year legacy. It's been an extraordinary experience and an equally extraordinary honor to be a part of it. Thank you.
just want to say real quick, it's been an amazing honor and privilege to work with Davida. She is a force of nature. And when she says she wants to do something, it happens. Thank you, Davida.
Again, our heartfelt thanks to you, Davida, and all of the wonderful people you assembled to put forth a truly magnificent celebration. And it continues, as we know. There's still aspects that are going to take place. So again, thank you so much. Under new business, the next item is a request we receive annually, and it is by the Old Greenwich Merchants Association, and it's a request for a temporary road closure of Sound Beach Avenue to host the First Light Festival, which will be on December 5th, 2015. With us,
Do you want a break for like 5 seconds? Just take a bite of them, they're leaving.
joining us today, Rich Fulton from the Old Greenwich Merchants Association. And again, this is a drill that you've done many years now, and you work very closely with the Greenwich Police Department's Traffic Division, as well as Parks and Rec. And you'll be featuring horse-drawn carriage rides, carolers, in-store magic shows, face paintings, and plenty of holiday cheer. Rich is the proprietor of Chili Bear, which is at 180 Sound Beach Avenue, Old Greenwich. Got to give you a little plug there. And again, I don't think we have any questions. This event has gone on without a issue, and we're here to grant you the formal approval that's necessary to do the road closure. Let's see. So the request, and we need a motion, is to grant the road closure from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the evening of Saturday, December 5th. It's been moved by Mr. Toner and seconded by Mr. Marzullo. All in favor? Aye. Great. Congratulations. You're off for another.
See you all.
Also, Peter, I just wanted to
Oh, sure, please.
point out to everyone, this was sort of a last-minute thing for us. We're partnering with Neighbor to Neighbor this holiday season, so we're going to be doing a coat and blanket drive. So
Very nice.
That'll go on throughout the whole season.
Great.
So people can make donations, obviously, right to Neighbor or to any OG merchant, and then we'll gladly make the donation on their behalf. And then wanted to also thank you guys for your help with the block party this summer, which was a great success in spite of the rains. I think we've got rain out of our system, but we were, benefiting the Fedorkos and the foundation in their daughter's name, which was great, and we were able to make a nice donation in support of their cause. So appreciate your help and support for that event as well.
Right. Well, thank you for all the good work that you do to
Thank you.
benefit the community.
Appreciate
Really
it. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
The next item, C, is the acceptance of the 2015 Homeland Security Grant Program. This, again, is another routine item that comes before the board in its capacity as the identified local authority to accept this. So what this is a agreement between the state of Connecticut, local municipalities, and the 5 regional fiduciary agents responsible for providing programmatic and financial oversight to projects determined to be beneficial by the regional emergency response groups in the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. The state of Connecticut administers these funds through memorandums of understanding. It's done on a yearly basis, and our requirement is to approve the resolution to continue to be a participating body. So is there a motion to approve the 2015 Homeland Security Grant Program Region 1 A.
So moved. Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Our emergency management director is temporarily out of commission. He broke his ankle in, I believe, 3 or 4 places and underwent surgery yesterday. I received a report that he has gone through the surgery successfully. He's been pieced back together, so to speak, and will be recovering over an extended period of time in an air cast. But in the interim, Police Chief James Heavey has been designated as the town's emergency management director. So the next item is under new business is D, and it's a request for a temporary road closure due to a diseased elm tree near the corner of Indian Field Road and Osceola Drive. I believe the materials in with our agenda delineate the days that this proposed closure would take place. It's actually proposed to take place over a 2-day period starting November 3rd, Election Day, which is a no-school day, to minimize the disruption to the school bus routes. They hope to complete the work in 1 day, starting at 8 a.m. and finishing at 4 p.m. The second day is built in to account for unseen events during the job. There is notification being made by leaving a flyer at all homes immediately affected by the road closings, which will include a phone number and email so they can be reached if they have any further questions. So the detour sign locations are the corner of Indian Field Road and Osceola Drive, the corner of Sachem Road and Osceola Drive, the corner of Sachem Road in Sound Shore Drive, the corner of Sound Shore Drive in Indian Field Road, and the corner of Indian Field Road in Morningside Drive. Officers will be stationed at each location to assist in the flow of traffic due to the high volume of vehicles in the area. This work is being performed by Jesse of Lewis Tree Service. I don't know. Welcome. Do you want to come? Are you Jesse?
I am.
Welcome, Jesse. Why don't you, Jesse Fedek?
Yes.
Welcome. Fedak, sorry.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is work being performed at the request of Bruce Bayman, the tree warden, to help eliminate Dutch elm from the area. There are some other elm trees that could be affected if this tree were to be allowed to stay, so.
Is the tree on public or private? Public?
It's on public property, but the abutting property owner is in favor of the tree coming down.
Okay. And how many, I mean, just,
Sure.
how many Dutch elms are within the vicinity of this one?
There's 3 that I can immediately think of, but it could travel in the ideal circumstances for the disease. It could be airborne. So it's something that we want to take care of sooner than later.
I see.
And it's also going to benefit the power lines. It's that's the ancillary situation where the power lines will be protected by the tree coming down, because it's only going to decline and become a danger to the power lines as well.
Great.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jesse, thanks. So is there a request to approve the temporary road closure for November 3rd and 4th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, with that objection. The next item, E, is pertaining to Bruce Park Avenue, and it is specifically a closure and detour request from the Department of Public Works Sewer Division. The wastewater division is undertaking an important sewer rehabilitation project. They will be rehabilitating a 600-foot-long segment of a 39-inch diameter interceptor sewer located in Bruce Park Avenue near Davis Avenue and in an easement behind the homes between Bruce Park Avenue and the Amtrak rail tracks just north of I-95. 16 manholes and chambers will also be structurally restored as part of the project. A significant portion of the town's wastewater collection system empties into this critical interceptor, and daily flow in this line is substantial. In order to perform the necessary sewer rehabilitation work and maintain sewer service to residents and businesses, a complex flow bypass arrangement is required. This bypass will be similar to what we did last year at Horse Neck in Shore Road Sewer Rehabilitation Project. The plan involves diverting flow from the north and east of the Bruce Park Avenue area to a bypass pump and pipe system that is being set up along Davis Avenue south of I-95. As with most of our work for sewer infrastructure restoration, the trenchless method of sewer rehabilitation will minimize disruption and excavation in streets and on private properties. To direct wastewater flow away from the work area and into the bypass system, approximately 110 feet of temporary sewers and 2 temporary manholes need to be constructed in Bruce Park Avenue, just west of the intersection with Davis Avenue. These temporary sewers will require excavation near the middle of the street. Additionally, during installation of the sewer line system, a tractor-trailer-type vehicle will be staged near the center of Bruce Park Avenue, also just west of and Davis Avenue. Therefore, temporary closure of Bruce Park Avenue between Havemeyer Place and Davis Avenue will be required during these activities. It is currently anticipated that this road closure will be required for approximately 1 week in either late October or early November for the temporary sewer construction, and again at 2 separate times, less than 12 hours each, sometime in either mid to late November for this minor installation. Davis Avenue will remain open for the duration of the construction. Appropriate signage to facilitate the traffic detour around the closure will be provided. In our materials, we have the traffic control plan and details. The remainder of the project, including abandonment of the temporary sewers and removal of the temporary manholes, as well as the majority of the sewer and manhole rehabilitation work, can be accomplished with lane closures overseen by uniformed police officers. The road will remain open except for the detours requested. The request is for the Board of Selectmen to approve this so that the work can begin as outlined and planned. So with us today, we have the Superintendent of the Wastewater Treatment Division of Public Works, Richard Feminello. And I want to congratulate you, Rich. I understand that you are a new dad, and you're acclimating to the role very well.
Yes, not too much sleep, but yeah. Thank you very much. I think you summarized the project very well. It'd be very similar to what we did last year in Horse Neck and Shore Road. So really, kind of just step over here for a second. In order to do the rehabilitation, we have to redirect flows. So that's really the purpose of that. So if you're heading eastbound on Railroad and on Railroad and Bruce Park Avenue, you would head then up Mason Street to Millbank, around to Lincoln, and then south down Davis. If you were heading westbound, you would basically do the reverse, Davis to Lincoln and back down. And if you were coming southbound down Davis, you would continue to Museum Drive and then take that up to Steamboat. So like you had summarized, we're looking to do that. The temporary sewer work in late October. That'll take roughly a week to do. And then on 2 separate occasions to insert the cured-in-place lining system, that'll be mid to late November. And those will just be roughly 12-hour days to do that work. And the same thing for that 1 week duration when we're doing the temporary sewer bypass work. Those would be regular working days, and at the end of the day, it'll be opened up again. So that's the gist of the request.
Great. Do you have any questions?
Just one. Where does the sewer line flow down there? Does it go up Bruce Park Avenue? Or
Well, actually, what happens is that, the piece that we're doing, there's a chamber structure. There's actually a chamber structure here on the intersection.
Mhm.
And then it winds up cutting down through an easement behind the properties, and runs behind the properties, just north of the railroad tracks, behind Bruce Park Avenue, and discharges at the termination point. The whole purpose is to line this section behind the houses, roughly 600 feet. There's another plan that actually shows that. Eventually overflow winds up at Grass Island. But the bypass that we're setting up is complicated, and that's going to be set up at Bruce Park, and then that will wind up running a long ways, all the way to a manhole adjacent to the Plaza building off of Exit 3, over there.
Rich, if you could just, again, quickly, a thumbnail, summarize all of the similar type work that has occurred over the last several years. I know that I don't know if you were here when they did the forest main underneath Coscob Harbor. Was that?
That was before I came. Yeah, that was to replace a section of the old Greenwich Common Force Main with a horizontal directional drilled. I don't recall the exact length of that. Then we did, in the last few years, we did that section from Strickland, Sound Shore Road, all over there, to replace that section in Coscob that had previously had some breaks in it. We're actually currently going to be starting the replacement of the next segment, which actually will jack underneath Indian Field Road, and then it'll run in the, I guess, south of the Metro North Railroad tracks and north of 95, along that little easement area. Last year, we accomplished a huge, I think it was over 2,000 feet in a very short span of time for Horse Neck and Shore Road, and that essentially takes 99% of the town's sanitary sewer flow. And we're just fortunate enough that through the bidding process, the same team that did that project got awarded this project. So we're anticipating that we will have similar success. And we continue to do these types of projects all over town. And we're trying to, the primary focus is looking at critical, large diameter sections first, and then moving out to the smaller underlying areas that, should something happen, they're easier to handle in an emergency as opposed to this type of thing.
Yeah. I know that you had sent some really clear photographs of the restored lines and the material. It was like a white.
Yeah, we were trying,
Kind of.
I had an attempt to get that on the website, and we've been trying to do that. We for that project, because it was such a dense area, and there was a lot of folks that were interested, we did weekly updates for that 12-week period. So we did a lot of photos, a lot of
You
information.
did a very good job of documenting and communicating it. I know that.
But we wanted to keep everybody informed. Everybody was interested, and we were very appreciative of everyone's support. Because it's our goal to get this stuff done. We know it's a bit of an inconvenience, but it beats any of this stuff failing.
Exactly. So we'll proceed, if there's no questions on this, further questions, to approve your road closure and detour requests for the purposes of executing this sewer rehabilitation project. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, all those in
Thank
favor?
you very much. I appreciate it.
The next item on our agenda today comes to us from the Department of Parking Services. It is to consider a residential pilot program for East Elm Street. In June of this year, there was a petition to the department for residential parking on East Elm Street between Millbank Avenue and Quarry Knoll. And the director, Ms. Azralian, is here today to request we conduct a pilot program for approximately 6 months to give the residents time to adjust to this. So welcome.
Thank you, thank you. And you put it well. There was a request to come in from East Elm to experiment with the residential parking program, and we thought it would be a good candidate. It's a pilot program. We need the Board of Selectmen's approval to initiate the pilot program. Once that's in place, we're going to put up temporary signs, give out permits, and see how that goes. The goal is to basically view and monitor the parking to see if that is, if it warrants a permit parking program. So that's the goal, is to entertain this request and see how it goes. And if at the end of the 6 months, whether it warrants or not, we're going to be before you to either accept or deny the pilot program. And attached for your reference are is a map, basically, of the location where it's going to take place. And as you know, based on the map, it's actually one side of the street that's permit parking. The other side is no parking due to the narrow widths of the road.
Great. Are there any questions
Yeah, just so I
specific?
understand, what you're doing is you're only going to permit residents on East Elm Street to park on East Elm Street. Is that correct?
Yes, so all the residents of that street, Millbank Avenue to Quarry Knoll, will have an option to purchase the permit if they wish to park on the street. If they wish to reside in their own parking space, they don't need a permit, but basically on the street. And the reason we're doing this careful analysis is because there is no parking on one side of the street. So parking on that street is actually very limited as is right now, and we have no way of determining who's parking on that street, whether it's people who are parking going to Greenwich Avenue, employees, people going to the train station. So this will give us a better idea of who actually is utilizing that street to park. And then once we find out, we get a better idea based on the permit sales of who's utilizing the street, whether it's actually the homeowners, which would give us the reason to not implement it because the people parking on that street actually do live on that street, or if it's outsiders, therefore causing the homeowners difficulty when they're parking on the street. That makes sense?
Well, it makes sense. But that means that I, as a taxpayer in the town of Greenwich, could not park on that street.
You are correct.
And I'm paying to maintain that street and to plow it and to clean it.
You are correct.
Well, I'll have to think about that.
Jeez. Jeez.
There's been, when I started, there's been a reduction or basically a limitation on all residential parking for that reason. And we've been basically studying to see the effects of parking, especially so close to Greenwich Avenue and the impacts of the employees and the merchants. However, this is something that we felt could be a good analysis and a good review, a test case, as you may say, to see what's really going on in the parking. So this is only a pilot program. It's not approved. I'll come back to you guys 6 months later to see what our studies find. And if we find that it's, in fact, the residents, then we're going to propose to eliminate this. If we, in fact, find that there's a lot of individuals who are coming in from other side of the street, then we'll make a different proposal. But this is just a pilot program. There's no,
But this has been implemented elsewhere in the town.
it has, prior to my arrival, yes.
That was my question, follow-up, Selectman Toner. How many programs like this exist in town?
There's about,
You can't park. He does raise a good point.
there's
I
about
mean,
50 streets and about, I want to say 13 zones, 13. It does cause a lot of, the way we enforce, it does affect the way we enforce the residential parking. And we're currently evaluating that going forward. So that is something that is in the works. and is
Can you
being studied.
provide to this board which streets are
Yep.
specifically resident? I mean, I kind of want, that's a good question.
It's in the code, yeah,
It's in the code, yeah.
it is in the code.
Well,
But
I
can
know,
give you
I
a
know
better
that one of
idea.
the streets that's impacted is the one next to the hospital thrift shop, and that affects the operation of the hospital thrift shop because volunteers can't park on that street.
There's a parking lot that's adjacent to the hospital, Lafayette lot.
Right, but we leave that for customers.
Yes, we try to open it up, but that is something that I have been trying to do a study and analysis, the effect of residential parking on the businesses within, and I've actually yet to find anything published in the newspapers. I've contacted the Planning Association, APA, American Planning Association, and they don't really have anything like that. So it'd be interesting. I'm doing my own analysis to see, because it becomes a parking real estate and the value of that to the neighboring areas, especially downtown Greenwich or Putnam Avenue. We're studying that right now.
Okay. I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Okay. So Rita, you're looking really for two different actions though, right? One is East Elm,
Well, the first one is East Elm, and I separated
and the other
out.
is the regulations, which are coming up next. But Joe, please.
Yeah, I had a question, a little bit of history. The first residential parking permits were given by your predecessor on William Street in Byron. And the rationale then, and I think it's still the rationale, is that there are people, especially in a dense neighborhood like Byron, who don't have off-street parking. What's happened over the years, it's been very successful for our street. One of the reasons I gave in favor of residential parking was so that my then, she was, I think, 93-year-old mother-in-law could easily get to her house. It also stopped people from parking on our street and taking the train into Dorchester. It's been enforced, like any law, without enforcement, it doesn't work. And I applaud the department for that. But I think the idea behind residential parking is an acknowledgement that those with off-street parking should not also be able to park on the street. In other words, if you have a curb cut, right, and you have access to off-street parking, then you shouldn't be able to park on the street. What's happened is my neighbor has now been given a residential parking permit. He has a 50-foot curb cut, and he also has 3 cars. So my question is this a change in policy? The idea, I think, behind residential parking is to say, you guys who don't have a off-street parking, driveway, should be able to park in front of your house or close to your house. I'll give you an example of what would happen if this policy were implemented. The policy of giving residential parking permits to those who also already have off-street parking available. Church Street West, from Mead Avenue to South Water Street, has 22 curb cuts. If you gave permits to each one of those people with off-street parking, a permit to do that, they're also given, by the way, 3 parking permits to go with it. 1 primary and 2 temporary. So in theory, those with curb cuts could put 66 cars on Church Street. So my question is, has the policy changed? And if so, have you or the town figured out what the impact would be around town? Do you have a way of knowing when someone applies for whether or not they have available off-street parking?
Well, and I think that's the whole goal. I think the intent behind residential parking was a great idea, and is to provide people with lack of spaces on street. However, when you're restricting it to the residents of that street, you're basically excluding those people who have driveways. In terms of enforcement, in terms
People
of...
with driveways are excluding the people who don't have driveways.
But in terms of fairness...
Why are they not?
In terms of fairness, I don't think you can exclude people who actually live on that street that have a right to have that
So
permit.
you would suggest that the ones on Church Street,
Have a right to have that permit.
they can have, is that part of the policy, is that been written down?
The
Is that part of
policy
the
says
charter?
that anybody who lives, is a resident within those streets and those boundaries is able
And
to
that-
get a
and that's
permit.
written down.
That is, yes. You have to be a
Tell me
resident.
where?
You have to be a resident of that street.
Oh, I know, but if you have off-street parking, you're saying that the 66 permits could be given to...
Nobody's excluded from having a permit, because in terms of enforcement, in terms of fairness, I think that's another reason to actually study residential parking. You know, when you come to East Elm, it's such a small street, and there's no parking on one side as is. There's only limited amount of parking on that one street. But how do you deny a permit to somebody who lives on that street?
My concern is fire. And my concern, and I think the example I gave was a very good one, 22 curb cuts in 1 block. So you're saying that those 22 people's driveways can put 66 cars on the street.
It's up to them. If they wish to have a permit, we cannot exclude them.
Is that part of the town charter?
You have to be a resident of that street. To be a resident of that street, to qualify for a permit, that is in
No, I
the charter.
understand that. That's in the charter?
That's in the charter. If you're a resident of that street, you are allowed to get a permit of that
Okay, and that's
street.
section 14, I think, is that where it is? I'd love to see
Limited
the
parking.
language. I couldn't find it anywhere. That if you have off-street parking available, that you can then also...
It's not 14, it's,
But I
it's under
appreciate your
residential
time.
parking.
I think it's something that really should be looked into, because it's an either-or situation in my mind. If you're going to allow those with off-street parking to also park on the street, then I think the implications of that have not been studied, and I think it should be studied, especially in a street like Church.
Thank you.
Take that into consideration. So, first request is to approve a pilot program for East Elm Street between the Millbank Avenue to Quarry Knoll, and anybody who's a resident of that street who lives within those parameters is eligible to purchase a permit regardless of whether they have a driveway or not.
Okay. Do you-
So moved.
Your,
Your pilot is moved.
okay.
Pilot.
Is
Yeah.
there a
How long's the
second?
pilot again?
6 months.
6 months, yeah.
Is there a second?
Yeah, there is for 6 months.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The second item for parking is, when I first started, I looked at the regulations under parking, and there was a lot of inconsistencies with the parking rules and regulations on the street versus what's in the ordinance. So my attempt is, as we're going through this, is to go into each ordinance and update it and change it. And this one specifically deals with metered parking. And basically cleaning up metered parking, establishing a section that introduces metered parking, which there had not been before. So now when you go into that section, it specifically talks about metered parking. And then it goes into 15-minute, there's a reserved section, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and so forth. It's also changing the schedule. And upon doing so, we've been kind of going through each parking lot to make sure the use is being maximized. And we identified the Board of Ed North and the Board of Ed South as two particular lots where the parking was a little bit confusing. So what we did was we restricted Board of Ed North, and we set up a pay station in there, and we put it in as 12 hours, and now that's a pay lot. The Board of Ed South was also a pay lot, but it was not utilized as a pay lot. So now that's turned over to the Board of Ed for their use because they have a lack of parking. So hopefully working with the Board of Ed and getting that taken care of to also open up the parking for people on Greenwich Avenue. Once we did that, based on the numbers and statistics, we actually found that half of the lot is being utilized, so half of that lot is empty. So my next step is to actually go to the chamber and let them know that this is a parking lot that can be utilized. You can pay with a pay station, or you can pay with over the phone. And you know, if you're running out of time, if you pay for an hour and you're at a store and you're shopping, you can add over the phone. You don't have to go in there and put back to the meter. So it's a great machine, a great location, and actually opens up a lot more parking for people of Greenwich Avenue, for shoppers, merchants, and it's 12-hour parking. So that adds a little bit more to the parking real estate on Greenwich Avenue. So that's basically what it is, and it's reflected in the changes as a now 12-hour lot, as opposed to, and the Board of Ed South is actually eliminated as a metered lot, and it becomes a permit lot only for the Board of Education.
Are there any questions about this? I do want to point out that we would get closer to Monday in the, call it rededication of the Greenwich Common, that you went through great lengths to remove the meters in lieu of, now have a pay station, which now the stanchions are
The meter posts are gone.
gone, and the aesthetic has been improved greatly, and I think more vegetation was put in. I saw another email this morning. We continue to get more and more green
Oh, yeah.
as time goes on through the, again, generosity of the donors of the project.
It's a beautiful park, and by doing that, by automating and making improvements to these parking lots, we do eliminate the poles. Aesthetically, it becomes more pleasing, and we can actually put in trees or greenery and a lot of landscaping where those meters posts once were. So now you're actually taking up a single parking space as opposed to proliferation of these poles. So it's a cost savings as well. So this is a benefit to everybody. And I'm glad that the Board of Ed North was able to get cleaned up and done in time for the unveiling of the Commons.
No, thank you. I know that you worked hard on that. Questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, without objection. Do we need to sign that for you? Each clip one is a signature.
Yep, this is the sections of the code.
So those are the two approvals, right?
I have a question on another topic about parking. Did this, Mr. Chairman, did this board ever formally, I don't know if it required an approval during the winter months in terms of the emergency when we call a?
Yes,
So
that
that's
was
been, it's now been changed to what? A traffic emergency? I mean, I mean, a ban, what are we calling it? When
The first
Peter-
selectman is the traffic authority, and whatever he deems as an emergency, all streets fall under that category, unless they're already specifically listed.
So
in
the
think
board,
it's the
the
Board
board,
of Selectmen.
yeah, the
Board of
board,
Selectmen,
yeah.
Yeah.
You guys make that a decision. So even though I think the confusion was if the streets weren't listed, what authority you had, and it's,
Yeah, I was
once you
talking
make that.
specifically the language, only because in the past, we would vote on a traffic ban, really, what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing, opposed to putting an I think people were confused. I think when that went out, when we get that
Yeah.
recording,
Yeah.
I think it was a language
It
change.
was, yeah, and it was changed so that any emergency declaration of the board of a emergency ban falls under that. So all the vehicles are off the road during that
Yeah.
ban. once
So I think the
it's
key thing is what Selectman Marzullo was saying, it's really a parking ban. When we
Yes.
say, oh, we're declaring a snow emergency, what does that really mean? A
Yeah.
snow emergency in terms of you stay in your house, or if we say it's a snow emergency has been declared and the parking ban now goes in effect on those designated streets. And I think what you
designated
did was update the streets to make sure it incorporated some that had been posted with signs but not put in the regs. So that was done. And then we changed the
The language
the
is
the
a part-
verbiage so
yeah.
that it gave greater clarity.
We
Which is somewhat in line with what you see in other communities where you drive down, you see, snow emergency route, ban.
Opposed to a true declaration of emergency, or that falls under Peter, opposed to a traffic ban is the
A
Board of
state of
Selectmen.
emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah, the state of emergency declaration comes under, I believe, the state statutes, and it follows from the governor down to the community, yeah. And also then it has implications for us in some cases with, I believe, collective bargaining agreements, language that may be in them related to when people go on overtime and so forth. So,
Do you want me to send you a copy of what was changed?
No, just the language, I just need to know if the language was changed in terms
Yep,
of the
we
traffic
changed the
ban, that's
language,
it.
it's
That's
clear
it.
so people understand. I know that was a big complaint, that there were no signs, the streets weren't listed. Yeah, we cleaned that up already.
yeah, I know you've been working to administratively review and clean up some idiosyncrasies, so thank you.
Thanks, Rita.
Okay, the next item, H, was to look at meeting calendar dates. The reason for doing this at this time is that we have to reserve meeting room space. The board by town charter is required to meet once a month. And in that context, I believe the language says the first selectman should update the board on items that have occurred. So we have meetings twice a month. One of the things that we can take into consideration if we want to forego approval today and wait until the 29th, Mike? Is if we wanted to envision interspersing some night meetings. I know we've talked about it, and I think we've generally taken the impression that if there was an issue that warranted being alternate location, we would do so. But I mean, I throw it out, that's something that you want to consider and think about, or you prefer keeping what's been the, I know that Mr. Borsak wants to weigh in on this, right?
Yes, it's perfect the way it is.
Doesn't interrupt your meeting.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, we can always change it. Okay, so Mr. Rosen says he reserved these times.
Just change it.
We can change it at a later date, as the need arises or necessitates.
Yeah.
Okay, so does someone want to move this as presented? And let me just ask, has this been checked to correspond with the school calendar and also observation of religious holidays?
Religious holidays, also WestCog, it's been checked against that.
Okay.
And not sure about the school calendar, but these are morning meetings, so
It's okay.
usually it's okay.
Okay, so do you have a motion? Or?
So moved. Second.
Okay, without objection. So that completes all of the new business under appointments and nominations. Anybody have any?
Yeah, I was wondering, I was talking to Drew before, the way the appointments are sent to us, or the nominations rather, can we ask the Honorable Crumbine to change the form to include what person this proposed nominee is replacing, or if this person is being renominated, and for what period of time? Because you have to search all over the place to try to get this information.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. So first change would be to put on the form whom the person may be replacing,
Right.
or if in fact they're being nominated or seeking renomination.
Right.
Good suggestion.
And then for what term?
And then for the length of term.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, do you want to communicate that and just copy us on that? So we still have HDC, Historic District Commission. We still have one potential opening on the New Lebanon Building Committee, of which the affiliation is relevant because of the minority representation statute. And then Nathaniel Witherell, we have, I believe, 2 positions. So that's, and then, that's it. Okay. The next item on the agenda is executive session. I believe, Mr. Rosen, you've noted that we have
Tax appeal.
one tax appeal and 2 matters of pending litigation. So under the terms of the Freedom of Information, I seek a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing a pending tax appeal and 2 matters of pending litigation.
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, without objection and for purpose.